What's up, fellow YouTubers, and welcome to the first of many new videos on artist mindset. See, from my experience as a private tutor and an instructor at the Icon Collective, and my own struggles as an artist, in my humble opinion, the mindset is the hardest part of this entire creative process. We can learn all the technical skills, and those technical skills may help us express our ideas easier, but time and time again, I've seen so many amazingly talented artists who are stuck being held back by their self-defeating thoughts, their fear of judgment, and so many other forms of resistance. This series is going to focus on the tools and tactics to essentially overcome ourselves and the struggles we face when we start releasing our creations out there into the world. We're going to cover things from practical skills you can apply to more psychological concepts that we can debate and consider. So in this first video, I want to share a book that has changed my perspective and still does every time I read it. And that book is Turning Pro by Pressfield. Essentially, this book is a guide to leave the amateur life and accept a professional life and a professional mindset. Pressfield is most known for his book, The War of Art, where he talks about resistance. See, resistance is anything that holds you back, from self-defeating thoughts to procrastination to living a life based on other people's opinions and even living a life of addiction. The idea of resistance is really predominant in Turning Pro. The book starts off with the backstory of Pressfield's life and how he essentially turned pro when he rented a little tiny shack in the woods and spent a year just writing. He had no socialization, no alcohol, no sex, just work. This backstory lays a foundation for the rest of the book's overall concept that states life is essentially split into two different segments: before you turn pro and after you turn pro, and that you will never forget the moment you chose to turn pro. Personally, I remember the first time I heard of this book, the first time I read this book, and every time I've actually reread this book over and over and over again, because even when you make the choice to essentially turn pro and focus on your goals, life is essentially a roller coaster, and a lot of times we'll lose focus, we'll lose our passion, but you keep getting back on that roller coaster, and this book is one of my essential tools for refocusing and recommitting to myself. So let's talk about the first half of the book, before turning pro. Here, the book calls out all the different forms of resistance we may be facing, such as procrastinating when you should be creating, getting hooked on addictions from alcohol, drugs, success, but also more innocent addictions too, like numbing your feelings with social media, helping others to feel better about yourself, or even just numbing yourself with pornography. Also, before we turn pro, many of us fall into what Pressfield calls living inside of a shadow life or getting stuck in a shadow career. See, these are lifestyles and jobs that give us the ultimate excuse not to pursue what we really desire. He goes on to use an example of something where the shadow career is the most dangerous when it's directly involved in the industry that you want to be successful in. So think of a writer who wants to be a writer of original works but gets a great paying job as a publisher, and then all of a sudden has a perfect excuse that they don't have enough time to work on their original work or release that into the world. Or with music, and what hits home for me is when all you wanted to do is be a performer on stage, touring all over, but you get caught into, let's say, ghost production and spending all your time making other people look good and helping others out with their music instead of working on your own music. See, in these shadows, lives, and careers, it's really easy for the excuse of lack of time, comfort from a consistent paycheck, and several other forms of resistance that will block you from doing what you truly want to do. Then Pressfield says there's a moment for everyone. But unlike the concept of, let's say, a mass awakening, the decision to turn pro happens after you recognize that you're just living in a slow-burning hell. All the little hellish moments we recognize will eventually lead us to no other choice but to turn pro. Pressfield makes a really valid point that those who make the most out of their hellish situations are just prolonging the decision to shift into a pro life. And this, again, is a form of resistance. Now, once the choice is made to become pro, the rest of the book then talks about the difference between the amateur and the pro mindset, and this all comes down to habit. In a future video, we'll cover a book called Atomic Habits, but for now, let's talk about the main pro habits inside of turning pro. First, the pro starts their day and shapes their day around goals. The amateur, on the other hand, seeks distraction and wakes up to check, let's say, social media right away, or instantly responds to emails in a way to help other people to eventually feel better about themselves for helping other people all the time. The pro, however, begins their day by recognizing what they need to do that day to take a step closer to their goal and their objective. If you want to be a full-time music producer, how much time do you spend every day producing compared to, let's say, sitting on Instagram or TikTok? The pro takes control of their time. The amateur gives their time to others and justifies it by being too busy to accomplish their dreams. Second, the pro is going to take on the scariest things first. The amateur, however, fills up their life with little things that don't really matter. If you are scared to be a writer, the first thing you should do is start writing, especially if you're scared shitless about the judgment from other people. The amateur will always put off the scariest things because if they complete those scary things, it reinforces the fact that they are on the wrong path. Third, the pro has a ritual. I once heard a quote, "I only create when I'm inspired, and that happens every morning at 8:15 when I stared at a blank page for 15 minutes. You see, a pro will create a time, a place, and an intention for their creativity. This starts to train your mind to just get to work and understand that inspiration and creativity come from doing the work. The amateur doesn't have a space or any time set aside for their process. They usually get caught up in drama or self-loathing or some other form of resistance. The pro has a ritual, and that's exactly why we have studios as musicians. We need to create a sacred space for our creativity. Now take a look at the space around yourself. Is it inviting? Do you want to be there? Does it inspire you to be creative? And lastly, the pro doesn't care about what anyone else thinks. They just go for it. This, I think, is one of the hardest parts because we're human and we all have fear of judgment, being rejected, being criticized, and it's human nature to want to be accepted, but this is the difference between average and legendary. You can be very successful chasing trends, and there's nothing wrong with that if that brings you joy, but the danger lies in getting stuck into that and not creating something because you're scared of what other people will think. This is limiting your self-expression based on a hypothetical response from people you don't even know. The pro understands that the work is the reward and all else after that does not matter. The amateur gets so concerned with judgment that they essentially get paralyzed, they don't take any action, and they get stuck. And the real, hard, honest truth that Pressfield points out is that no one really cares. Everyone's so caught up in their own life that they don't really care. When you release a song, you put out some artwork or publish a book, people will respond based on their immediate impulse and then move on to the next thing. With social media, people's attention span is only a couple seconds. And whether or not they like or dislike your creation doesn't matter. There are millions and millions of potential fans out there, and if you're true to yourself, the ones that are meant to be your fans will eventually find you, or your work will find them. The worst thing you can do is not be true to yourself, create a fake version of yourself, attract a lot of people to that fake version, and then as soon as you wake up and start working on the things you really want to work, you're going to lose all that audience and start fresh because they were dedicated to a falsified version of yourself. At the end of the day, the only person you need to be true to is yourself. Personally, I've gone through a ton of projects. I've had momentum in several of them, gone on tours, and right when they're getting successful, I came up with some sort of bullshit excuse to change the name, change the genre, and start all over. I mean, I've gone from pop to tech house to hip hop to trap to techno, right back to all of them over and over again. And if I was honest with myself, I would have just picked one name and produced all genres under one name and not worried about anything else. But that was my amateur mindset. And that mindset is a mindset of the past. That being said, Turning Pro is one of those books that I've given out to so many different people, and I always have a copy on hand. It's a quick read. It only is about 200 pages. And we're going to be giving out this copy right here. So my question to you is, where are you in your journey? Are you in the amateur phase in a shadow life or a shadow career? Are you in a hellish phase and on your last nerve and ready to lose it all and just finally turn pro? Or have you finally rededicated to yourself and you're currently living that pro life? If so, what were some of your biggest points of resistance that you had to overcome? Please leave a comment down below, and we're going to select one of those comments and send out this copy of Turning Pro to someone who really needs it and is ready to turn pro. Now, if you like these kind of mindset videos, also please remember to like this video, subscribe, follow. On that note, thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention. Now go make something cool.